So you see, my dear Koningsbe, that the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. Benjamin Disraeli, British Prime Minister 1804 to 1881. The advent of the Industrial Revolution, the invention of a banking system based on usury, and scientific and technological advancements during the past 3 centuries have had 3 major consequences, and have made it possible to mold the minds of vast populations by application of scientific techniques through the media and control of the educational system. The wealthiest families on planet Earth call the shots in every major upheaval that they cause. Their sphere of activity extends over the entire globe, and even beyond. Their ambition and greed for wealth and power knows no bounds, and for them, most of mankind is garbage, human garbage. It is also their target to depopulate the globe and maintain a much lower population compared to what we have now. It was Baron Nathan Mayer de Rothschild 1840–1915 who once said, "I care not what puppet is placed on the throne of England to rule the British Empire on which the sun never sets. The man that controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." What was true of the British Empire is equally true of the U.S. Empire, controlled remotely by the London-based elite through the Federal Reserve System. Judged by its consequences, the Federal Reserve System is the greatest con job in human history. It is sad and painful that man's most beautiful construction, and the source of most power and wealth on earth, viz. scientific knowledge, the most sublime, most powerful and most organized expression of man's inherent gift of thought, wonder and awe, became the tool for subjugation of humanity, a very dangerous tool in the hands of a tiny group of men. These men hire the scientist and take away, as a matter of right, the power the scientist creates through his inventions. This power is then used for their own purposes, at immense human and material cost to mankind. The goal of this handful of men, the members of the wealthiest families on the planet, the elite, is a new world order, the one world government, under their control. Secrecy and anonymity is integral to the operations of the elite, as is absolute ruthlessness, deep deception and the most sordid spying and blackmail. The elite pitches nations against each other, and aims at the destruction of religion and other traditional values, creates chaos, deliberately spreads poverty and misery, and then usurps power placing its stooges in place. They operate through covert and overt societies and organizations. Professor Carroll Quigley wrote, "The powers of financial capitalism had another far-reaching aim, nothing less than to create a world system of financial control in private hands to be able to dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. This system was to be controlled in a feudalist fashion by the central banks of the world acting in concert, by secret agreements, arrived at in private meetings and conferences. The growth of financial capitalism made possible the centralization of world economic control and use of this power for the direct benefit of financiers and the indirect injury to all other economic groups." Winston Churchill, who was eventually bored by it all, wrote around 1920. "From the days of Spartacus Weishaupt to those of Karl Marx, to those of Trotsky, Vilenkin, Rosa Luxemburg, and Emma Goldman, this worldwide conspiracy for the overthrow of civilization and reconstitution of society on the basis of arrested development, of envious malevolence and impossible equality, has been steadily growing. It played a definitely recognizable role in the tragedy of French Revolution. It has been the mainspring of every subversive movement during the 19th century, and now at last, This band of extraordinary personalities from the underworld of the great cities of Europe and America have gripped the Russian people by the hair of their heads, and have become practically the undisputed masters of that enormous empire. The high cabal exposed by JFK. It was in the dark days of World War I that Churchill referred to the existence of a high cabal that had brought about unprecedented human history. Churchill is also said to have remarked about the elite, "They have transported Lenin in a sealed truck like a plague bacillus from Switzerland into Russia," quoted by John Coleman in the Tavistock Institute of Human Relations, Global Publications 2006. Duarte. Consider the 1961 statement of U.S. President John F. Kennedy JFK before media personnel. The word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, secret oaths and secret proceedings. For we are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence. It depends on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections, on intimidation instead of free choice. It is a system which has conscripted vast human and material resources into the building of a tightly knit, highly efficient machine that combines military, diplomatic, intelligence, economic, scientific, and political operations. Its preparations are concealed, not published, its mistakes are buried, not headlined, and its dissenters are silenced, not praised. No expenditure is questioned, no secret revealed. I am asking your help in the tremendous task of informing and alerting the American people. Secret societies, secret oaths, secret proceedings, infiltration, subversion, intimidation. These are the words used by JFK. On June 4, 1963, JFK ordered the printing of Treasury dollar bills instead of Federal Reserve notes. Executive Order 11,110. He also ordered that once these had been printed, the Federal Reserve notes would be withdrawn, and the Treasury bills put into circulation. A few months later, November 22, 1963, another order of JFK, too militarily disengaged from the Far East by withdrawing U.S. advisors from Vietnam, was also immediately reversed after his death. After the Cuban crisis, statements by men like Disraeli, Wilson, Churchill, JFK and others should not leave any doubt in the mind of the reader about who controls the world. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt wrote in November 1933 to Col. Edward House, "The real truth of the matter is, as you and I know, that a financial element in the larger centers has owned the government since the days of Andrew Jackson." It may be recalled that Andrew Jackson, U.S. President from 1829 to 1837, was so enraged by the tactics of bankers Rothschilds that he said, "You are a den of vipers. I intend to rout you out, and by the eternal God I will rout you out." If the people only understood the rank injustice of our money and banking system, there would be a revolution before morning. Interlocking structure of elite control. In his book Big Oil and Their Bankers in the Persian Gulf, for Horsemen, 8 Families and Their Global Intelligence, Narcotics, Dean Henderson states, "My queries to bank regulatory agencies regarding stock ownership in the top 25 U.S. bank holding companies were given Freedom of Information Act status, before being denied on national security grounds." This is ironic since many of the bank's stockholders reside in Europe. This is, on the face of it, quite astonishing, but it goes to show the U.S. government works not for the people but for the elite. It also shows that secrecy is paramount in elite affairs. No media outlet will raise this issue because the elite owns the media. Secrecy is essential for elite control. If the world finds out the truth about the wealth, thought, ideology and activities of the elite, there would be a worldwide revolt against it. Henderson further states, the four horsemen of banking: Bank of America, J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup and Wells Fargo own the four horsemen of oil: ExxonMobil, Royal Dutch/Shell, BP, Amoco and Chevron Texaco, in tandem with other European and old money behemoths. But their monopoly over the global economy does not end at the edge of the oil patch. According to Company 10-K filings to the SEC, the four horsemen of banking are among the top 10 stockholders of virtually every Fortune 500 corporation. It is well known that in 2009, of the top 100 largest economic entities of the world, 44 were corporations. The wealth of these families, which are among the top 10% shareholders in each of these, is far in excess of national economies. In fact, total global GDP is around $70 trillion. The Rothschild family wealth alone is estimated to be in the trillions of dollars. So is the case with the Rockefellers, who were helped and provided money all along by the Rothschilds. The U.S. has an annual GDP in a range of $14 to $15 trillion. This pales into insignificance before the wealth of these trillionaires. With the U.S. government and most European countries in debt to the elite, there should be absolutely no doubt as to who owns the world and who controls it. To quote Eustace Mullins from his book The World Order, the elites rule the U.S. through their foundations, the Council on Foreign Relations, and the Federal Reserve System, with no serious challenges to their power. Expensive political campaigns are routinely conducted, with carefully screened candidates who are pledged to the program of the world order. Should they deviate from the program, they would have an accident, be framed on, or indicted in some financial irregularities. The elite members operate in absolute unison against public benefit, against a better life for mankind in which the individual is free to develop his or her innate creativity, a life free of. James Forrestal, the first Secretary of Defense of the U.S., became aware of elite intrigue and had, according to Jim Marrs, accumulated 3,000 pages of notes to be used for writing a book. He died in mysterious circumstances and was almost certainly murdered. His notes were taken away and a Sanity's version made public after 1 year. These men are not incompetent or stupid. Consistency has never been a mark of stupidity. If they were merely stupid, they would occasionally make a mistake in our favor. The Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations, the Trilateral Commission, and the mother of all these, the Royal Institute of International Affairs, are bodies where decisions about the future of mankind are arrived at. Who set these up and control them? The international bankers, of course. In his book The Secret Team, the CIA and its allies in control of the United States and the world, L. Fletcher Prouty, who was the briefing officer to the President of the U.S. from 1955 to 1963, writes about an inner sanctum of a new religious order. By the phrase secret team he means a group of security-cleared individuals in and out of government who receive secret intelligence data gathered by the CIA and the National Security Agency (NSA) and who react to those data. He states, the power of the team derives from its vast intragovernmental undercover infrastructure and its direct relationship with great private industries, mutual funds and investment houses, universities, and the news media, including foreign and domestic publishing houses. He further adds, all true members of the team remain in the power center, whether in office with the incumbent administration or out of office with the hardcore set. They simply rotate to and from official jobs and the business world or the pleasant haven of academia. training the young for elite membership. It is very remarkable as to how they are able to exercise control and how they always find people to carry out the job, and how is it they always make the right decision at the right time. This can only be possible if there exists a hidden program of inducting and training cadres mentally, ideologically, philosophically, psychologically and ability-wise, over long periods of time and planting them in the centers of power of countries like the US, UK, etc. This training would begin at a young age in general. There must also be a method of continual appraisal, by small groups of very highly skilled men, of developing situations with their men who are planted throughout the major power centers of the world so that immediate remedial action that always favors elite interests, can be taken. How does that happen? It is in finding answers to these questions that the role of secret societies and their control of universities, particularly in the U.S., assumes deeper importance. The work done by men like Anthony Sutton, John Coleman, Eustace Mullins and others is groundbreaking. Mankind owes a debt to such scholars who suffered for truth but did not give in. Whenever you trace the money source of important initiatives designed to bring about major wars, lay down policies for the future, enhance control of the elite over mankind, etc., you will invariably find them linked to the so-called banking families and their stooges operating out of foundations. In April 2008 I was among the approximately 200 vice-chancellors, rectors and presidents of universities from Asia, Africa, Europe and the U.S. at a two-day higher education summit for global development, held at the U.S. State Department in Washington, D.C. The summit was addressed by 5 U.S. secretaries, including Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice. The real emphasis throughout the summit was only on one thing, that universities in developing countries operate in partnership with foundations so that global problems could be solved. These are private foundations and the only way to understand this emphasis is to realize the U.S. government is owned by those who own these foundations. As an aside, the inaugural address was delivered by the war criminal responsible for millions of deaths in Rwanda, trained in U.S. military institutions, and awarded the doctorate, Dr. Paul Kagame. The very first presentation was made by the CEO of the Aga Khan Foundation. In a fascinating study of a Yale secret society Skull and Bones, Anthony Sutton uncovered numerous aspects of profound importance about this one society. In his book America's Secret Establishment, An Introduction to the Order of Skull and Bones, Sutton points out there is a set of old-line American families and new wealth that dominates the Order of Skull and Bones: the Whitney family, the Stimson family, the Bundy family, the Rockefeller family, the Harriman family, the Taft family, the Bush family, and so on. He also points out that there is a British connection. The links between the order and Britain go through Lazard Freres and the private merchant bankers. Notably, the British establishment also founded the university, Oxford University, and especially All Souls College at Oxford. The British element is called the Group. The group links to the Jewish equivalent through the Rothschilds in Britain. Lord Rothschild was an original member of Rhodes' Inner Circle. The order in the U.S. links to the Guggenheim, Schiff and Warburg families. There is an Illuminati connection. Every year 15 young men, and very recently women, have been inducted into the order from Yale students since 1832. Who selects them? A study of the career trajectories of many of those chosen shows how they rise to prominence in American life and how their peers ensure these men penetrate the very fabric of important U.S. institutions. They are always there in key positions during war and peace, manipulating and watching ceaselessly. The influence of the elite families on the thought processes of nations is carried out through academic institutions and organizations, as well as the media. Sutton writes, among academic associations the American Historical Association, the American Economic Association, the American Chemical Society, and the American Psychological Association were all started by members of the order or persons close to the order. These are key associations for the conditioning of society. The phenomenon of the order as the first on the scene is found especially among foundations, although it appears that the order keeps a continuing presence among foundation trustees. The first chairman of an influential but almost unknown organization established in 1910 was also a member of the order. In 1920 Theodore Marburg founded the American Society for the Judicial Settlement of Disputes, but Marburg was only president. The first chairman was member William Howard Taft. The society was the forerunner of the League to Enforce Peace, which developed into the League of Nations concept and ultimately the United Nations. The United Nations is an instrument of the elite designed to facilitate the setting up of one world government under elite control. The building stands on Rockefeller property. Selecting future prime ministers to serve the New World Order. In his article, Oxford University, the Illuminati Breeding Ground, David Icke recounts an incident that demonstrates how these secret societies and groups, working for the elite, select, train and plan to install their men in key positions. In 1940 a young man addressed a study group of the Labour Party in a room at University College, Oxford. He stressed that he belonged to a secret group without a name which planned a Marxist takeover of Britain, Rhodesia and South Africa by infiltrating the British Parliament and civil services. Since the British do not like extremists, they dismiss their critics as right-wingers while themselves posing as moderates. This seems like the anti-Semitism charge by ADL, etc. whenever Israel is criticized. The young man stated that he headed the political wing of that secret group and he expected to be made Prime Minister of Britain someday. The young man was Harold Wilson, who became Prime Minister of Britain 1964–70, 1974–76. All young men studying at Ivy League universities, and at others, must bear in mind they are being continually scrutinized by some of their professors with the intention of selecting from amongst them those who will serve the elite, and become part of a global network of interlocked covert and overt societies and organizations, working for the New World Order. Some of those already selected will be present among them, mingling with them and yet, in their heart, separated from them by a sense of belonging to a brotherhood with a mission that has been going on for a long time. These young men also know they will be rewarded by advancement in career and also that if they falter they could be killed. Utter secrecy and absolute loyalty is essential to the continued success of this program. This is enforced through fear of murder or bankruptcy and through a cult which probably takes us back to the times of the pyramids and before. Philosophically they believe in Hegelian dialectics through which they justify bringing about horrible wars, euphemistically called controlled conflict. Their political ideology is collectivism whereby mankind has to be managed by a group of men, them, organized for the purpose, a hidden dominant minority. They believe that they know better than ordinary mortals. The Illuminati, the Freemasons, members of other known and unknown secret societies, all mesh together under the wealthiest cabal in human history to take a mesmerized, dormant and battered mankind from one abyss to the next. Former Mile 6 agent John Coleman refers to a committee of 300 that controls and guides this vast subterranean human machinery. In his book Memoirs, published in 2002, David Rockefeller, Sr. stated that his family had been attacked by ideological extremists for more than a century. Some even believe we are part of a secret cabal working against the best interests of the United States, characterizing my family and me as internationalists and of conspiring with others around the world to build a more integrated global political and economic structure, one world, if you will. If that's the charge, I stand guilty. And material cost to mankind. The goal of this handful of men, the members of the wealthiest families on the planet, the elite, is a new world order, the one world government, under their control. Secrecy and anonymity is integral to the operations of the elite, as is absolute ruthlessness, deep deception and the most sordid spying and blackmail. The elite pitches nations against each other, and aims at the destruction of religion and other traditional values, creates chaos, deliberately spreads poverty and misery, and then usurps power, placing its stooges in place. Placements during the past 3 centuries have had 3 major consequences, and have made it possible to mold the minds of vast populations by application of scientific techniques through the media and control of the educational system. The wealthiest families on planet Earth call the shots in every major upheaval that they cause. Their sphere of activity extends over the entire globe, and even beyond. Their ambition and greed for wealth and power knows no bounds, and for them, most of mankind is garbage, human garbage. It is also their target to depopulate the globe and maintain a much So you see, my dear Koningsbe, that the world is governed by very different personages from what is imagined by those who are not behind the scenes. Benjamin Disraeli, British Prime Minister 1804 to 1881. The advent of the Industrial Revolution, the invention of a banking system based on usury, and scientific and technological advanced job in human history. It is sad and painful that man's most beautiful construction, and the source of most power and wealth on earth, this scientific knowledge, the most sublime, most powerful and most organized expression of man's inherent gift of thought, wonder and awe, became a tool for subjugation of humanity, a very dangerous tool in the hands of a tiny group of men. These men hire the scientist and take away, as a matter of right, the power the scientist creates through his inventions. This power is then used for their own purposes, at immense human and lower population compared to what we have now. It was Baron Nathan Mayer de Rothschild 1840–1915 who once said, "I care not what puppet is placed on the throne of England to rule the British Empire on which the sun never sets. The man that controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." What was true of the British Empire is equally true of the U.S. Empire, controlled remotely by the London-based elite through the Federal Reserve System. Judged by its consequences, the Federal Reserve System is the